Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I was scrolling through Reddit last week, reading about entitled drivers getting what they deserved. It reminded me of an incident from my time as a paramedic back in 2023. We received a call to attend to a bariatric patient who had fallen. The patient was morbidly obese and weighed around 420 pounds. But this story isn't really about them. There are countless reasons people reach this size, and I've never judged, only helped. The real issue was their insufferable neighbor, Mr. Thompson, whom we'd encountered several times before. What a piece of work he was. Our patient, Mrs. Smith, had a car and a valid disabled parking permit. She also had a city-designated disabled parking spot outside her home, which Mr. Thompson repeatedly parked in. The city had sent him multiple warning letters, and he'd received several parking tickets, which only seemed to make him more belligerent. That February morning, we got the call that Mrs. Smith had fallen. When we arrived, I couldn't believe what I saw. "You gotta be kidding me," I muttered to my partner Sarah. Not only was Thompson's SUV parked in the disabled spot, but he'd also positioned his wife's sedan to block Mrs. Smith's driveway completely. After assessing Mrs. Smith, I suspected a broken hip. She needed immediate hospital transport. I sent Sarah to speak with Thompson. 5 minutes later, she returned, shaking her head. His exact words were, "Do one, love. I'm not moving anything." "Charming as ever," I replied, reaching for my radio. "Time for Plan B." I contacted our control center. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. We need fire service and police assistance at 1542 Maple Street. Blocked access, bariatric patient." The fire crew arrived first. I briefed Captain Rodriguez about the situation. One of his crew, Mike, went to Thompson's door. Through the window, we could hear Thompson's voice. "I don't care who you are, mate. Those cars aren't moving." Captain Rodriguez turned to me. "Is the patient's life at risk?" I knew exactly where this was heading. "Yes, sir. Critical equipment needed, and we can't access the property properly." He nodded, then spoke into his radio. "Jenkins, clear the access." What happened next was pure justice. The fire engine's bumper made contact with Thompson's SUV, and slowly but surely, both vehicles were pushed down the street. Thompson came bursting out of his house, face red as a fire truck. "This is illegal! I'll sue all of you!" he screamed, waving his arms wildly. The police sergeant, who had just arrived, simply said, "Sir, step back or you'll be arrested for obstruction of emergency services." Thompson's face fell as the sergeant added, "We've got quite a file on your parking violations, Mr. Thompson. Want to add another charge?" Mrs. Smith, despite her pain, managed a small smile as we wheeled her out. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing my hand. Sadly, she passed away 3 months later in the hospital, but I'll never forget that small victory. Sometimes karma needs a little help from a fire engine. The next one is an entitled people's story. Let me start by saying that I never thought I'd be writing about something like this, but here we are. I own a townhouse in an upscale development in Virginia, which I bought as an investment property about 3 years ago. The previous owner had been renting it out, and I continued doing the same when I purchased it. What makes this situation unique is that while my property is within the development, it's one of 12 units that were built before the homeowner association was established. These original townhouses have what's called grandfathered rights to use all the community amenities, including the gym, pool, and clubhouse, without being homeowner association members or paying their fees. This was all clearly documented in my property deed and the community's original planning documents. Everything was fine for the first couple of years. I would occasionally use the gym when I was in the area checking on my property or meeting with my tenants. The old homeowner association board understood the situation and had no issues with it. But then Janet Thompson got elected as the new homeowner association president 6 months ago, and everything went downhill. The first time I encountered Janet was when I was using the gym one evening in October. I had just started my workout when she burst through the door, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me, but this facility is for homeowner association members only," she announced in that condescending tone that just screams, "Karen." I looked up from the treadmill. "Actually, I'm a property owner here. Unit 127. We have grandfathered rights to use the facilities." Janet's face tightened. "I don't know anything about that. What's your name?" I told her my name and explained the situation, even offering to show her my property documents on my phone. She wasn't having any of it. Well, I'm the homeowner association president, and I've never heard of such an arrangement. You'll need to leave immediately, or I'll have to call security. I stood my ground. Feel free to check the records. My property's rights are clearly documented. I'm going to finish my workout. She stormed out, but I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Over the next few weeks, she tried various tactics to prevent me from using the gym. First, she had the entry code changed and forgot to notify me. When I pointed out that this violated my property rights, she reluctantly gave me the new code. Then she started leaving notes on my car when I parked in the gym lot, claiming I was in violation of parking rules. I kept all these notes as evidence of harassment. The situation kept escalating, but I made sure to document everything and remain professional in all our interactions. The breaking point came last month. I was doing my usual evening workout when Janet showed up with 2 police officers. "That's him," she declared triumphantly. "He's trespassing and refusing to leave." The officers approached me professionally. "Sir, we've received a complaint that you're not authorized to be here." I remained calm. "Officers, I own Unit 127 in this development. My property has deeded rights to use these facilities. I have documentation right here on my phone, and my lawyer can provide additional verification if needed." I pulled up the relevant documents and showed them to the officers. One of them read through them carefully while Janet stood there fuming. "Ma'am," the officer finally said, turning to Janet, "this appears to be a civil matter. The documentation shows he has a legal right to be here. We can't remove him." Janet's face turned red. "But he's not an homeowner association member. He doesn't pay fees." "That's correct," I replied, "because my property was here before the homeowner association existed. These rights were specifically preserved when the homeowner association was formed. My lawyer has already sent you 2 letters explaining this." The officers apologized for the disturbance and left. Janet stormed out, but not before threatening, "This isn't over." She was right about that, but not in the way she expected. The next day I had my lawyer file a formal complaint against the homeowner association for harassment and violation of property rights. We included all the documentation of her various attempts to deny me access, including the police incident. What Janet didn't know was that I wasn't the only owner of a pre-homeowner association unit who'd been having problems with her. After filing my complaint, I reached out to the other owners and discovered she'd been harassing several of us. 5 other owners joined my complaint, turning it into a much bigger legal issue for the homeowner association. The homeowner association's insurance company got involved once they realized the potential liability. They brought in their own lawyers, who quickly recognized that Janet had put them in a legally indefensible position. The documentation of our rights was crystal clear, and Janet's actions were textbook harassment. Things moved pretty quickly after that. The homeowner association's lawyers arranged a meeting with our attorneys, and it became clear they wanted to settle this before it turned into an even bigger legal mess. During the negotiations, we learned that Janet had actually been warned by the homeowner association's legal counsel about our rights months ago, but she had chosen to ignore their advice. The settlement terms we reached were comprehensive: a formal acknowledgement of our property's rights to use all facilities, $15,000 in compensation to each affected owner, installation of a new electronic key card system for facility access, a requirement for the homeowner association to provide written copies of our rights to all future board members, Janet's immediate resignation from the homeowner association board. But here's where it gets even better. During the investigation prompted by our complaint, it came to light that Janet had been using homeowner association funds for some questionable personal expenses. She had apparently been charging her personal trainer sessions to the homeowner association under the guise of facility maintenance consultations. The homeowner association board was furious when this came out. The day after the settlement was finalized, I was at the gym when Tom, the new interim homeowner association president, came in to apologize personally. "I can't believe how out of hand this got," he said, shaking his head. "We knew about your rights. It was all in the files. Janet just refused to accept it." "Why didn't anyone stop her sooner?" I asked while wiping down the bench press. Tom sighed. "She had most of the board convinced that she was protecting property values. Plus, she's married to a local judge, so people were hesitant to challenge her. Big mistake, obviously. The new keycard system was installed last week. Now, instead of dealing with changing codes and harassment, we all have permanent access cards that can't be deactivated without a board vote and legal review. The system also tracks access attempts, so if anyone tries to interfere with our usage again, it'll be documented automatically." I ran into Janet at the local coffee shop yesterday. She was sitting with some friends and very obviously avoided making eye contact. One of her friends, however, gave me a knowing smile. Turns out the whole incident has become quite the topic of conversation in our local community Facebook group. The settlement money was nice, but the real satisfaction came from the changes it brought about. The new homeowner association board has been incredibly professional, and they've implemented several new policies to prevent similar issues in the future. They're even hosting a community unity event next month to help repair relationships between homeowner association and non-homeowner association members. My lawyer told me that our case is now being used as an example in local real estate law circles of how not to handle grandfathered property rights. She even got invited to give a presentation about it at a regional homeowner association management conference. As for my gym routine, I'm there 3 times a week now, completely hassle-free. Some of the regular homeowner association members who used to avoid eye contact when Janet was around now stop to chat with me. One of them, an elderly gentleman named Rick, told me that standing up to Janet was the best thing that could have happened to the community. She had everyone walking on eggshells, he said during our conversation between sets. Nobody wanted to use the gym when she was here because she'd always find something to complain about. Now it's actually enjoyable again. The whole experience taught me something important about standing up for your rights. It would have been easier to just give up and join the homeowner association or find another gym, but that would have meant losing a valuable property right and letting a bully win. Sometimes you have to stand your ground, document everything, and be willing to fight through proper legal channels. Last week, I received an unexpected letter from one of the other pre-homeowner association property owners. She's an elderly widow who had stopped using the facilities entirely because of Janet's harassment. She wrote to thank me for taking the lead on the legal action, saying she's now back to using the pool for her water aerobics classes, something she'd missed terribly. "You gave me back a piece of my life," she wrote. "Sometimes it takes one person willing to stand up to make things right for everyone." The irony of the whole situation, the homeowner association's insurance premiums went up significantly due to the settlement, meaning current homeowner association members are now paying higher dues, all because Janet couldn't accept that 12 properties had the right to use facilities without paying those dues in the first place. As for Janet, I heard through the grapevine that she and her husband are putting their house on the market. Apparently, living in a community where everyone knows you got caught abusing your position and misusing homeowner association funds isn't very comfortable. I almost feel sorry for whatever homeowner association she ends up in next. Almost. The next one is a malicious compliances story. A little bit of backstory to help explain some of the later facts. In the military, every piece of equipment gets preventative maintenance done on it to maintain it in good working condition. In the Navy, we have a very well laid out maintenance system with step-by-step instructions on how to do every bit of maintenance, with instructions so simple a monkey could do it. Part of these maintenance procedures lists required tools, parts, materials, and test equipment, and they are also extremely specific, detailing the length requirement of your screwdrivers, the brand of your gauges, etc. The management of this system the Navy uses is called the Maintenance and Material Management System, 3M, or Planned Maintenance System, PMS. As an electrician, we owned all electrical distribution equipment on board, and for jobs without an electrical training background, we also owned the actual equipment. So, the electronics technicians with electrical training could maintain their own electrical equipment, but the cooks, culinary specialists, without an electrical background, relied on us to maintain their equipment for them. Now, if you've ever used a commercial flat-top grill griddle before, you know you set it to a specific temperature you want the cooktop heated to, and not a 09 dial like your stove at home. Part of maintaining the griddle was checking the calibration of this temperature setting once every year or two. I forget how often this check was, but it wasn't a frequent check. Relatively early on, when I got on board the ship, young EMFN, junior electrician, Gwen BD94 was assigned to do this maintenance check, so I gathered all of my tools, parts, materials, etc. In doing so, I couldn't find the proper temperature sensor for our calibrated temperature gauge. We had the round-tip ambient temperature probe for use in the ovens, but not the flat-tip surface temperature probe for use on a griddle. I asked a different supervisor to my favorite supervisor for help, and he couldn't find it either, so we ordered a new one, and he said he'd take care of the paperwork for the maintenance check. Being new and unfamiliar with the system, I let it go and never questioned when the maintenance check disappeared from the maintenance list the next week, meaning someone accomplished it, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, and all was good. The next time this maintenance check came up due, we were on deployment, and it was again assigned to me. By this time, we had a new supervisor, and I was now EM3, slightly less junior electrician, Gwen BD94, a bit more knowledgeable. I looked where we kept all our calibrated equipment and couldn't find the flat-top temperature probe I knew it needed, so I asked my supervisor. He found we had one on order but didn't know that we had one in the shop, and told me to figure it out. Knowing that was an unlawful order and would amount to lying about the check and could bite me in the ass later, I said I wouldn't do the maintenance without the right equipment, and since he couldn't lawfully order me to, we started putting a note on the check that the tools were on order and delaying it. This went on for about 2-3 months until the check was about to go red, move out of periodicity and cause negative numbers on out maintenance reports, and I was again ordered to figure it out or I'd be written up. I refused and raised the same issue to my boss's boss, and we tore the shop apart trying to find the right equipment but couldn't find it, so he told me not to worry about it. Later that week, while I was on watch as a roving watchstander, allowed to walk around the ship and even required to, after dinner one evening I saw a newer, more junior electrician, let's call him EMFA Timmy, even more junior than I initially was electrician, in the galley kitchen working on the griddle. I took a step into the galley and asked him what he was doing, and lo and behold, he was doing the maintenance check. I asked him what temperature probe he was using, and he showed me the one for the oven. I explained to him the issue and told him if he signed the maintenance check it would be gun decking, lying on official paperwork, and he could get in trouble, but let him make his own decisions as an adult. He decided to continue doing the check. I giggled and continued on with my watch. After my watch, it was nearly 10 p.m., so I went to bed for the night. About an hour later, I got woken up, being told my supervisor needed me in the galley. I signed, figuring it was about the check, and I was going to get that earlier threatened write-up. After getting dressed and making it to the galley, the entire electrical shop was in the galley troubleshooting the griddle. You see, EMFA Timmy got to the step in the PMS where it said to use a screwdriver to adjust a dial until the thermometer read the same temperature indicated by the set temperature. When he measured it, it was off by about 150 degrees, so he kept turning up the heat. Eventually, it was hot enough to melt the griddle's built-in over-temp protection device, instantly shutting the stovetop off. Turns out he did need that temperature probe. I was tasked with helping come up with a solution to fix it, because the griddle was a critical piece of equipment for the cooks, and we had no replacement parts to fix it. I asked MFA Timmy if he ever finished the last steps of the maintenance card, turning the grill off, putting it back together, reporting completion of the PMS. He told me he hadn't. I turned to my boss and said since the maintenance check I explicitly advised against doing without the proper tools was still ongoing, and I was informed I could do the maintenance or be written up, I'd stick with my original decision and refuse to do the maintenance. He could write me up in the morning during working hours, but in the meantime I was going back to bed. Have a nice night. In the morning I did indeed get written up, but for the insubordination, not for refusing the maintenance check. While my boss's boss looked on with the biggest crap-eating grin at me for holding my ground, and my supervisor was pissed at me. Turns out, I was right, and we couldn't do that maintenance check without the right equipment. This remains one of my write-ups I am least ashamed to have ever gotten, and I'd take it again in a heartbeat to give a giant "I told you so" middle finger to idiot middle managers. I later found an electronic record of the counseling chit my supervisor got for tasks people with doing maintenance without the proper equipment, because I laid out that this was a known issue we didn't have the right probe for years and threw his ass deep under the bus. Hated the guy. We got the right probe in about 6 months later. The next one is an entitled People Story. On Saturday, I, F38, went out to meet my friend Jerry, F38, in this small village where a lot of pseudo-hippies and pseudo-spiritual people hang out. Another friend, Brew, F41, joined, and we were strolling around when Gary bumped into a woman she knows. This woman, Lola, was obnoxious from the beginning and started following us around. I noticed Jerry was a bit annoyed by this, but she let it go. Lola stops and buys a big plate of food, potatoes, rice, etc. She starts eating with her hands and doesn't offer me any. I didn't think much of this as I didn't want it, but important for later. We finally sit at a bar/restaurant at around 2 p.m. Me and Jerry order a beer, Brew orders a tea, Lola doesn't order anything. I'm mostly quiet, listening to the conversation. Lola asks Brew how she survives, how she makes money. Brew is a bit taken aback but responds, and asks, "What about you?" To which Lola says, "I have no money ATM, that's why I'm asking." Brew wasn't feeling well and went home. Lola asks the waitress for hot water, fills Brew's empty teacup with it, and starts drinking from it. I just observed. Gary and Lola are talking, but I already didn't like Lola much. Later I learned she is one of these white European people who travel the world by asking for other people's charity. Mind you, I'm in a poor country and this is the type of person who asks for a discount in a local's farmer's market. The topic of their conversation was incredibly annoying to hear. Basically, she had a bunch of judgmental ideas around one-night stands and Jerry was trying to tell her this was just a constructed belief. I did not participate. By then it was 3 p.m. and I hadn't had lunch, and just a small breakfast. I ordered a portion of fries, the only vegan food in the place. It arrives and I eat it all without offering any. Gary casually mentions that I am a Buddhist, and Lola says she is surprised by this fact as I did not share my fries and that I am selfish. She said she was also a Buddhist and Buddhists share. I laughed and asked her whether she offered me any of her food before. She stays quiet. Then I said she can order her own if she wants fries. My view is, I'm a Buddhist, not the Buddha. Fries can look like a snack for the table, but in this case it was my lunch. She had just eaten a huge plate of food. I don't feel I have to share my food with anyone else and don't see how anyone is entitled to my food. Also, being judgmental and confrontational are both not very Buddhist, but I am sure she was not enlightened, so I don't hold anyone to the Buddhist standards. However, I can admit that I didn't offer any chips on purpose, and that I do judge backpackers. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.